eating pig and going for all the glory in gold, everybody loves you.
Yes, 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 yes.
But as soon as you take a stand for this is Torah. 1 Corinthians 11 is all about Torah. And if you tell someone to put a head covering on, they'll leave the congregation and they'll go, you know what I'm saying? We've had people come in here and a loving sister didn't want to rebuke them or didn't want to be harsh, but she told them how Yahweh expects her to act, because if she's already covered by the man in Mashiach, and if you're a single woman and you're not married, that's okay. Rabbi Moshe, Roberto, there's a man in divine government. You're under that. That's why you need congregational fellowship. You can't sit at home and let Paul Crouch be your pastor through the TV.
Oh, man.
Okay? Because if you're a single woman or you're not a married or a widowed woman, whatever the case is, you got to get plugged into a local Messianic Nazarene assembly so that you are plugged into the divine order. And when a woman or a man rips off their head covering, no, I'm not going to get into that legalism. No, that's good for you, but that's not good for me. You know what's happening? They are imitating their father, Satan. The first person to take off his head covering was she. He, she. Satan is both he and she. Get my teaching on that. That's an intensive teaching. I prove from Jewish and Christian sources that Satan was always considered male, female. Both. Okay? Neither and both. Okay? Who was the first person to take off his head covering? Satan. In the presence of Yahweh, he was the cherub that covers. This doesn't look good, sorry. Ezekiel 28. He was the cherub that covers. In other words, he reflected Yahweh's light. Yahweh, Psalm 104 verse 2, clothes himself with a garment of, we learned that last week, light. Yahweh allowed Satan to reflect. That's why he's Lucifer, or the what? Illuminating one. He took Yahweh Shekhinah. He took that Shekhinah and he covered the angels, the Melachim, with that Shekhinah. And so all the angels were covered with the Shekhinah of Yahweh through Satan, Lucifer. Read Ezekiel 28. He was called not just the cherub, but the Cheruv that covered all the angelic messengers with Yahweh's garment of light. And he said, no, I don't want to be the praise leader. I don't want to worship you. I want to be the recipient of worship. I want my own mountain. I want my own throne. I want my own kingdom. Yahweh says you'll be cast to the earth. And Satan goes, I don't care. And what's the first thing he did to show Yahweh that he was no longer in divine government? He took off his head covering. He could no longer cover the other Melachim because he removed his covering. He was allowed to cover. He was covered, and so he would cover the other Melachim in worship and song and praise to Yahweh. But as soon as he lost that covering, the first thing he did in Yahweh's face, he threw off his covering. You better think twice about taking off your head covering. I can't convict you Monday through Friday. That's between you and Yahweh. If you want to walk around without a head covering, it's between you and Yahweh. I walk around without a head covering too. But I'll tell you what, when you come into assembly, you better have a head covering on. When you come into public assembly, that's a whole different dynamics. It's completely different dynamics. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Okay, now what does this mean, verse 16, and then I'm going to, another couple hours and we'll close. Look at verse 16. Is anyone enjoying?
Yes.
Is anyone enjoying?
Yes.
Verse 16. If, however, anyone seems to be contentious, we don't have such a habit, nor do the assemblies of Elohim. Now, what does that mean in context? Verse 15 says, if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. The long hair is given to her as an indication that she ought to be wearing a veil, meaning the veil and the hair are one over the other. One goes over the other, they go together. But if someone is contentious, we don't have such a habit. What does that mean? If someone is being argumentative about something so basic, we don't have that kind of habit of being contentious because this is not open for debate. It is Torah.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Now the church says, you see now y'all head covering people, all y'all want to do is start arguments and be contentious and create problems in my religious community. No. No. We don't have the habit when it comes to this truth that we ought to reflect in the natural what is true of us in the spirit realm, that we are covered. We should not, we could not, we would not, we would not, we cannot have a habit about being, you want to be contentious about the rapture, that's your personal problem. All right? See me for medication later. But if you're going to get contentious over this, sorry, Yahweh's children don't have that kind of habit. And if you got the habit of arguing with the Torah, and the whole purpose here is don't cross-dress. You're going to be covered, but get covered rightly. And if you don't know what rightly is, and you don't have a shul, and you don't have instruction, let nature teach you. Let nature teach you. So there's no excuse. Well, the rabbi didn't tell me that. I went to a Baptist church I didn't know. Nature can teach you, and if you're going to argue about this, and we're going to fight about it, and all y'all don't write me letters, all right? I always get these letters, we love you, but you stink. We love you, but you're wrong. And then it's always, you know, signed, there's no signature, and it's anonymous. You know, I get those anonymous letters. Don't write me letters. I'm maturing in Yahweh. I read 1 out of 10. All right? I have other fish to fry. This week it didn't come from Babylon. It came from where? Mount Sinai. People would say, well, you're just following the Jews who learned this custom in Babylon. Was Moshe in Babylon? Was King David in Babylon? Were the priests of Israel and the firstborn of Israel who were ordained to the ministry by having their heads covered? And Yahweh said in Numbers, he said, if you take off your head covering, you have removed yourself and you are worthy of death and you are worthy of losing your everlasting priesthood. Hello? So those people who argue like that, they are being contentious, and in the assemblies of Yahweh, we are not to have that kind of habit. We are not to be contentious, period. We are not to be contentious. Okay, now, Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Listen to this. According to the Concise Encyclopedia of Greek-Roman Mythology by Savin Oswald, page 261, sacrifices were made to Saturnus. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Saturnus? Yeah. What's another way of saying Saturnus? S period A period Tan. Saturnus in his temple with uncovered heads according to Greek custom. This is from the Concise Encyclopedia of Greek and Roman Mythology. You're not listening. Page 261. The Encyclopedia of Greek and Roman Mythology states, sacrifices were made to Saturnus, Saturn, Apollo, all the Greek Elohim, deities, false deities, with heads completely uncovered. Every Greek Roman deity was worshipped by priest and parishioner in an uncovered manner. And we close with this. How many have heard of Alfred Edersheim, the Messianic historian? Edersheim? Tov. But isn't it funny when Yahweh says, don't be contentious about this? Isn't this one of the most contentious doctrines in religious communities? This is one of the most head covering, not head covering, men should wear, shouldn't wear, if women should, how long, how short. Women don't have to wear head coverings because they have a hair. Men don't have to wear head coverings because they're imitating the Jews and not Yahweh, right? I mean, is there anything less contentious than this doctrine? And Rav Shul says, he warns you, he says, this is not about being contentious, this is about getting back to Torah and away from your immorality. This is not, I am trying to forbid cross-dressing. I want everybody to follow nature and the Ruach and get your head covering on because it's indicative of who you are in divine order and divine authority and divine government. But when you manifest your divine order, don't do what the women. Women, don't shave your head and do what Satan did. Women, don't shave your head. Man, don't use long hair. He didn't say don't have long hair. He said don't have it as a veil, as a hang-me-down veil. Any of this make sense? Yes. It finally makes sense. After 25 years, it finally makes sense. Yes. That's why you're here. Amen. That's why I'm here. After 25, 30 years, it finally makes sense. But they just love pulling verse 4 out of the context and saying, don't follow the Jewish customs. And all those Jews, that's an anti-Semitic devil. That's what it is. It's an anti-Semitic spirit. And the anti-Semitic spirit is very subtle. Well, we love the Jews. That's not true, Rabbi. We love the Jews. We pray for Israel. Our church gives a lot of money to Israel. We take trips to Israel. Remember, you can love the Jews and still buy into anti-Semitic doctrine. I know a lot of Christian pastors, they die for Jews. They literally love the Jewish people. Of course they do, they're Ephraim. Amen?
Amen.
But that doesn't mean what they're teaching is not detrimental. The preacher of rapture is detrimental to the health. One house of Israel escapes to heaven, Ephraim, the other house, Judah, gets zonked. If that's not unequal weights and measures and a violation of Torah, you tell me what is. If it's not the time of Jewish trouble, it's the time of Jacob's trouble. Both houses, Jewish and non-Jewish Israel, go through the Great Tribulation. But listen to this. Alfred Edersheim, the Messianic Jew, in his book, Yeshua the Messiah, page 426, says this. He describes the dress of the time of the Second Temple period. When did Yeshua live? When did Yeshua live? In the time of, thank you, Yohanan. In the time of the Second Temple period. Listen to this. Quote, page 426 to 431. Edersheim in his book, Jesus the Messiah, says, in regard to the covering of the head, listen carefully, it was deemed a mark of disrespect to walk abroad, outside, or pass a person with a bare head. One of the foremost Hebrew scholars, Messianic, quoting the life and times of Yeshua the Messiah, says, it was the ultimate mark of disrespect to walk outside with a person bearing his head. Listen, slaves covered, this was the time of Yeshua, this is the time Yeshua lived. Slaves covered their heads in the presence of their masters. The ordinary covering of the head was the sudar. Take notes. Sudar, S-U-D, in the time of Yeshua. S-U-D-A-R, which was a kerchief, those of you who were laughing at me before, a kerchief twisted into a turban. Okay? A kerchief twisted into a turban. The common people wore a sudar. A kind of light hat was also in use, either of light material or felt. The sudar was twisted by the rabbis in a peculiar manner to distinguish them from the common people. So they would all wear a sudar, which was what? A twisted kerchief, but the rabbis would twist it in such a manner to distinguish them from the common people, or the rest of Israel, which also is not biblical. That's pride right there, trying to look different and dress different than the rest of Israel. We read besides a sort of a cap or hood attached to some kind of outer or inner garment of the outward appearance of Yeshua. Now listen, Yeshua's headgear was probably the sudar, wound in a kind of turban, or perhaps the maforet, which seems to have served as a covering for the head and to have descended over the back of the neck and shoulder. You're not getting that. Yeshua could have long hair, but he wore a maforet, which was a modified sudar that went back and not This is the Messianic Jew, one of the most respected, not just by Jews, by Christians. Edersheim is quoted from many pulpits on many Sundays. Edersheim is a very well-known scholar. Someone getting this? So Yeshua could have had hair that was somewhat longer, but it was presented to Yahweh in a way that didn't allow him to wear it forward as a what? As covering the face as a veil, but it was put behind him over the back of the neck and the shoulders. So here we have historical references that we can see Yeshua probably did wear a head covering. And if he's the high priest over the house of Yahweh, we know he has a head covering. He couldn't even be in the Holy of Holies in heaven without a head covering. If the priests of Israel have to wear a head covering, how much more the high priest? How can you have the priests of Israel wear a head covering and the high priest saying, no, I think I'll take a vacation? Amen? That's don't do what I do, but do what I say. You can't say, it's not do what I say. It's got to be, in Israel, it's not only do what I say, but it's also do what I do. Yeshua wore a head covering. Edersheim tells us. But he wore it, he had his hair in the back of his head. So his head covering was what? Covering, it was over it. He had his head covering over against his hair. Probably not long, but long enough to have it back. Hello? Brothers and sisters, that's the truth. And if anyone is contentious, we don't have that custom in the assembly. We will not be contentious over something that is Torah. If the Torah and the word of Yahweh is gray, if we're not sure if it's a gray area, that's fine. We could be contentious, we can have our opinion, but when Yahweh stops men, it's not a question of should men cover their heads, it's how. What does nature teach you? What does nature teach you, men, ladies? Ladies, does nature teach you to grab a big razor and start waxing your head? Is that what nature teaches, ladies? Then don't do it in the natural. Man, what does nature teach you? Then don't do that in the natural. That's all this is about. It's about the reintroduction of Torah to a pagan and misled Kehillah. Father, we thank you, Abba Yahweh, for your Tov word to us today. Abba, we thank you. We give you kol hakavod. You are wonderful. You are true, and you are even simple to understand when we understand through the eyes of the Ruach. And Father, for those who are least in the kingdom, like us, Father, even without the Ruach, nature can teach us when it comes to how to conduct ourselves in prayer and prophecy and public assembly. And so, Father, this day we take a stand back and we give you all the honor, all the tov, all the fruits of the Ruach that will come from this teaching around the world. Father, as you send this truth and you restore peace and tranquility and understanding, wisdom and understanding, da'at and binah to your people Israel, those coming out of religion, coming out of the church system, coming out of apostate Judaism, Father, and Islam. Father, may this teaching be sown in certain fertile soil. Father, may this teaching be shared and passed. May they recognize that those who are contentious are fighting Torah and not Rabbi Moshe. And so, Father, we give you all the praise. We give you all the honor. This is your word, and Father, you do with it what you will. And you send it where you please. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. B'Kol HaKeilah Yimru Amen V'Amen. This is what I'm going to do.
Torah.
Yahweh,